Tristan Vale had survived boardroom bloodbaths, hostile takeovers, and a helicopter emergency landing in the Andes. But nothing prepared him for the horror of a blind date set up by his friends. "I swear to God, if she's another influencer who thinks CEO is a personality trait, I'm walking out in 5 minutes," Tristan said as he stepped out of his matte black Aston Martin, tossing his valet ticket to the guy in a crisp white jacket. "You need to stop being so dramatic," said Miles, his best friend since college and the main culprit behind this ambush. "You haven't dated anyone in almost a year, just try one drink." "If she's awful, I'll never bring it up again." "She won't be awful," added Nina, Miles's wife, adjusting her clutch. "She's smart, grounded, and totally not your type, which is exactly why you need this." Tristan adjusted the cuffs of his dark gray tailored suit, his jaw tight. "Grounded sounds suspiciously like owns 12 cats and a vision board." They walked into the rooftop restaurant, an exclusive place with glass walls, fire pits, and a view of the entire Manhattan skyline. Tristan scanned the place with practiced ease, already plotting his exit strategy. Then he saw her. She was sitting alone at a corner table, sipping water, completely unaware of the chaos she was about to cause in his very ordered life. She had long dark hair pulled into a low ponytail, and her gray wrap dress wasn't flashy, but it fit her like it had been made for her. She looked composed, but her fingers tapped the side of her glass like she was ready to bolt. "Her name's Juliet. Juliet Palmer." "Don't be a jerk," Nina whispered before pushing him toward the table. Tristan approached, half preparing himself for forced small talk and an early exit. "Juliet?" he asked. She looked up. Her eyes were hazel, bright and sharp. She smiled politely. "You must be the guy Nina promised didn't talk about crypto." He blinked, taken off guard. "Guilty, I'm Tristan." She stood and shook his hand. Her grip was firm, confident, not flirty, not fake. "Let's get this over with, shall we?" He pulled out the chair across from her, surprised by how amused he suddenly felt. "That's the spirit." The waiter came over and Tristan ordered a bottle of red wine without looking at the menu. Juliet tilted her head, amused. "Bold move." "What if I hate red?" "Then I'll drink the whole bottle and you'll pretend to be impressed," she laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was real. They ordered dinner. She asked for the duck. He went with steak, and the conversation flowed easier than he expected. She told him about her job as a pediatric physical therapist, how she'd moved to the city 5 years ago from a small town in Oregon, and how she'd been tricked into the date by Nina, who was one of her favorite clients' moms. "And you?" she asked, swirling her wine. "What do you do?" "I run a company," he said casually. She raised an eyebrow. "That's vague. Mafia? Worse," he replied dryly. "Real estate development. I build things, mostly commercial, hotels, high-rises." Juliet didn't bat an eye. "Let me guess. You like control, hate inefficiency, and never take vacations." Tristan leaned in just slightly, intrigued. "You profiling me?" "Trying to figure out if you're as intimidating as you look." He smiled for real this time. "And I think you're slightly less terrifying with wine." They talked for hours. One drink turned into 2. Dessert appeared without them asking Nina's doing, no doubt. The city buzzed around them, but it felt like they were in a bubble when they finally stood to leave. It was almost midnight. Tristan walked her out. The night was cool, quiet. His driver waited at the curb. "I'll call you a car," he offered. "I'm 2 blocks away. I'll walk." He hesitated. "At least let me walk you." She looked at him, something flickering in her expression. "You don't have to do that." "I want to." They walked in silence for a moment. Then she said, "This wasn't awful." "That's high praise," he replied with a grin. She stopped in front of a brownstone. "This is me." Tristan looked at her. "Can I see you again?" Juliet looked up at him, eyes serious now. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you." A pause. Then she nodded. "Okay, call me." He watched her walk inside before stepping into his car. Miles and Nina were waiting for him at his penthouse when he got back, both wearing matching smug expressions. "Well?" Nina asked, sipping wine on his couch. Tristan loosened his tie and poured himself a drink. "I'm seeing her again." Miles looked stunned. "You never go on second dates." "I know." Nina's eyes lit up. "You like her." He didn't answer. He didn't have to, because for the first time in a long time, Tristan Vale didn't feel restless or bored or trapped. He felt curious, and that was dangerous. Because curiosity had a way of turning into something else, something real. Tristan arrived at her building precisely at 7, stepping out of the black SUV as soft rain brushed the pavement. He held a single white tulip in his hand, deliberately not roses, and wore a navy overcoat over a charcoal suit. He hadn't told her where they were going, only to dress comfortably. That had earned him a lifted brow and a quiet, "I don't trust surprises." He rang the buzzer. A moment later, the door opened and Juliet stepped out, pulling a tan trench coat tighter around her waist. Her hair was down this time, falling in soft waves past her shoulders, and she wore black ankle boots and dark jeans tucked into them. "That's a flower," she said, eyeing the tulip as she locked her door. "It's not a bribe," he said. "It's insurance, in case dinner is a disaster." She took it, holding it between two fingers. "You sure know how to lower expectations." He opened the SUV door for her, and once they were inside, she asked, "So where are we going?" "You'll see." The car wound through the city, crossing into Brooklyn. She glanced at him cautiously. "If this ends at an underground fight club, I'm getting out." He didn't answer. She rolled her eyes. They pulled up to a brick warehouse with tall windows and a single unmarked door. A woman in a black dress met them at the entrance. "Mr. Vale," she said with a nod. "Everything's ready." Juliet hesitated. "Okay, now it's starting to feel like a kidnapping." Inside, the space opened into a cavernous room lit with strings of warm lights hanging from the exposed beams. A long wooden table sat in the middle, surrounded by candles and platters of food. There were no other guests, just them. Juliet turned to him slowly. "Is this for us?" "I heard you liked things quiet," he said. She blinked. "You remembered that, of course." They sat down, and a private chef emerged from the back to explain the menu: marinated sea bass, saffron risotto, and grilled vegetables with lemon oil. Wine was poured. Juliet picked up her glass. "This is not what I expected when you said casual." He raised his own. "You said you didn't trust surprises. I thought I'd try to change your mind." As they ate, the rain tapped gently against the windows. Juliet took a bite of the risotto, then looked at him. "You do this often? Set up private dinners in abandoned warehouses?" "Not really." "No, I mean this, trying." He looked at her for a moment before replying. "I don't usually have a reason to." She didn't respond right away. "Then you're not what I expected either." "How so?" "I thought you'd be cold, polished, controlled, but you're strange." He laughed under his breath. "I'll take that as a compliment. You should. I like strange." He leaned back in his chair. "What about you?" "Do you do this often? Spend evenings with men who rent out entire buildings for dinner?" "Not exactly." He tilted his head. "You don't date." "I do, but not seriously. My work takes a lot out of me, and I've been cautious." "Why cautious?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she set her fork down. "I was engaged once. Years ago. He left 3 weeks before the wedding." He didn't flinch, didn't say anything stupid like "I'm sorry." He just nodded. "Why?" he asked quietly. He said he didn't want to be someone's second priority. "Thought I cared more about my patients than I did about him." "And did you?" "I cared about saving kids from wheelchairs. That doesn't mean I didn't love him, but I guess it wasn't enough." He studied her silently. "That's not on you." She shook her head. "Maybe not. But it made me think twice about who I let in." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that wasn't awkward but meaningful. "Why did you agree to this date?" he asked. "I didn't plan to. I told Nina no 3 times, but then I thought, maybe I shouldn't keep saying no to things just because they scare me." "And do I scare you?" "A little," she said honestly. "You walk into a room like you already own it. I've seen people like you before. You don't lose." "I lose," Tristan said. "But when I do, I make sure it matters." When they left the warehouse, the rain had stopped. The SUV was waiting, but she paused on the sidewalk. "I'll walk from here," she said. "I can take you back, I know, but I want to think, and walking helps." He nodded. "Will I see you again?" She hesitated. "Yes, but don't plan anything like this next time. Too much, too perfect." Then she leaned forward, pressed a quick kiss to his cheek, soft and unexpected, and walked away. Tristan stood still, watching her turn the corner, the tulip still wrapped delicately in her hand. Back in the car, his phone buzzed. "You're smiling," Miles said through the speaker. "What happened?" "She kissed me," Miles laughed. "Then what are you doing talking to me?" "Go find her." Tristan looked out the window, where rain had started to fall again in thin, silver threads. "I will," he said, "but not yet." Juliet didn't see Tristan again for 12 days. In that time, she buried herself in work, early morning hospital rounds, back-to-back therapy appointments, and late nights reviewing patient progress reports. She told herself she was too busy, that her life was full enough already, that she couldn't afford to get distracted. But every time her phone buzzed or someone knocked on her office door, her heart leapt, stupidly hoping, expecting. It wasn't until the 13th day, just after she finished helping a 6-year-old boy take his first independent steps post-surgery, that she walked out of the hospital and saw him leaning against the hood of a forest green Range Rover. He looked up from his watch as she slowed to a stop. "You disappeared," he said. "I was working," she replied. "So was I," he said. "Doesn't mean I forgot about you." She adjusted the strap of her canvas bag. "You could have called." "I wanted to do this in person." She crossed her arms, cautious. "Do what?" "Apologize," he said. "For overstepping. I thought maybe the dinner was too much." Juliet tilted her head. "You think I ghosted you because of one nice evening?" "I think you left that night with something on your mind," he said, "and I don't like unfinished things." She studied him. "You're used to getting answers. I'm used to earning them." Juliet sighed and looked toward the street. Cars passed. A cyclist shouted as he swerved around traffic. She turned back to him. "My ex called." Tristan stiffened. "You said he's not back. He just wanted to talk." "Closure, maybe." He didn't speak. "I didn't answer," she said, "but it got in my head, and then I started pulling away like I always do." "Because of him, because of me," she said, "because I hate not having control, and with you, I don't know where this is going." "Neither do I," he said. "But I know I don't want to stop finding out." Juliet's phone buzzed in her bag. She ignored it. Tristan stepped closer, his voice lower now. "Come with me, just for the night, no plans, no stages, just us." She hesitated. "Where?" "I have a place upstate, secluded, peaceful." "You could use a break." She looked down at her sneakers, then back up at him. "You're serious?" "I've never asked twice before." She narrowed her eyes. "That's supposed to impress me?" "No," he said. "It's supposed to tell you I mean it." She finally exhaled. "Fine, but I'm driving." "You look like the type who speeds on empty roads." "I do," he said. "But I'll behave." 3 hours later, they pulled into a gravel driveway lined with maple trees just beginning to turn gold. The house was low and modern, all wood and glass, tucked against the edge of a quiet lake. Juliet parked beside the garage and stepped out slowly. "You built this?" she asked. "I designed it," he said. "Had someone else handle the rest?" Inside, the space was open and warm stone fireplace, dark wood beams, windows that looked out over the water. He lit a fire while she changed into one of his oversized sweaters she found folded on a chair in the guest room. She came back barefoot, her hair damp from a quick rinse, and curled up on the couch without saying anything. He brought her tea, no questions asked. It wasn't until the flames had settled into a soft glow that Juliet broke the silence. "You seem different here." "How so?" "Less." She paused. "Closed," he thought for a moment. "This place is the only thing I've ever built just for myself. Everything else it's for clients, investors, cities that don't even know my name, but this is mine." Juliet traced the edge of her mug. "Why bring me here?" "Because when I think about who I'd want to share it with, I think of you." She looked over at him, eyes unreadable. "You know almost nothing about me." He leaned back. "Then tell me something." She hesitated. "I hate elevators." "Why?" "When I was 7, I got stuck in one for 2 hours with a babysitter who kept crying and telling me we were going to die." Tristan raised an eyebrow. "That'll do it. Your turn." He stared into the fire. "My father left when I was 10, took everything. My mother had to sell the house, move us into a rented apartment. I started working at 13, landscaping, then construction. I learned early that nothing good stays unless you build it yourself." She didn't speak for a while, then she said, "That's why you're so controlled. That's why I don't take anything for granted." Juliet set her mug down. You don't have to prove anything to me, Tristan. I'm not trying to. She stood and walked toward him, kneeling in front of where he sat. Then stop worrying about saying the right thing. Just be here. He reached for her hand. I am. Outside, wind rustled leaves across the deck. Inside, the world narrowed to one moment: the warmth of her skin against his, the sound of her breath, the quiet understanding that neither of them had expected this, and that they were both terrified of what it could become. Juliet stood at the edge of the lake, her arms tucked into the sleeves of Tristan's fleece-lined jacket, watching the morning clouds roll across the water like drifting silk. Behind her, the house was quiet. She could hear the faint hum of music from the kitchen, something low and jazzy, and the occasional clink of dishes being moved. She hadn't expected to sleep so soundly in a stranger's bed, hadn't expected the silence of the woods to feel like peace instead of isolation. She turned as the screen door opened behind her. Tristan stepped out barefoot, holding 2 mugs. You always wake up this early. She took the one he held out and wrapped her fingers around the warmth. Only when I feel like I'm somewhere I'm not supposed to be. Do you? She sipped. Not anymore. They stood in silence for a while, then she said, You know, I never let myself get this close to someone this fast. Neither do I. Then what are we doing? I think, he said, we're ruining our own rules. A week passed, then another. She saw him every few days, sometimes at his penthouse, other times at her place, where he insisted on trying to cook and nearly set her toaster on fire. She found herself laughing more than she had in years, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't looking for the exit. But everything shifted the night she met his mother. It wasn't planned. Juliet had stopped by his office to drop off a book she'd borrowed, and while waiting in the lobby, a woman in a navy silk dress stepped out of the elevator with a silver cane in one hand and a sharp-eyed assistant trailing behind her. She paused when she saw Juliet. You're not the receptionist, the woman said. I'm not, Juliet replied calmly. The woman studied her. You're here to see Tristan? Yes, I'm his mother. Juliet blinked. Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Juliet. The woman gave a small nod, her eyes still assessing. Are you the reason he's been smiling like an idiot lately? Juliet hesitated. I hope so. Tristan appeared seconds later, his face unreadable. Mother, I didn't know you were coming. I needed to speak with your CFO. She's terrible at returning calls. He turned to Juliet, his voice softening. You didn't have to bring the book in person. I was nearby. His mother glanced between them. Well, this is unexpected, but not unwelcome. After she left, Juliet exhaled. She's intense. She's everything I learned how to survive. Juliet reached for his hand. She likes me. She doesn't like anyone, he said. That was her version of rolling out the red carpet. But the real test came 2 days later when Juliet received a call from a hospital in Queens. A child she'd worked with for 4 months had suffered a setback. She spent the next 18 hours at the facility, coordinating with doctors, adjusting therapy plans, and sitting with a panicked mother until the child was stable. When she finally got back to her place, the sky was starting to lighten. She found Tristan sitting on her stoop, a thermos in one hand and a paper bag in the other. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice hoarse. You didn't answer your phone. I was working. I figured. So I brought you coffee and a breakfast sandwich that's probably cold by now. She sat beside him, too tired to pretend she wasn't on the verge of falling apart. I lost him, she whispered. He was walking on his own, and then he wasn't anymore. You didn't lose him, Tristan said. You're not responsible for every outcome. I have to be, she said. That's what I do. No, he said. What you do is fight for people when no one else does. What you do is show up, even when you're exhausted, even when it breaks you. She looked at him, her throat tight. Why are you still here? Because I told you I don't walk away from things that matter. And that was the moment she knew, not because of the grand gestures or the dinners or the lake house, but because of this, because he showed up when she was at her worst, because he didn't try to fix her. He just stayed. 3 weeks later, she stood in front of the mirror in a pale blue dress, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted the necklace she'd borrowed from Nina. Outside, the rooftop of Tristan's newest property had been transformed into a garden under lights, ivy woven through the railings. soft music playing from hidden speakers, tables set for 50 guests. "Are you ready?" Nina asked from the doorway. Juliet took a breath. "I think I have been." When she stepped outside, the crowd quieted. Tristan turned from the head of the table, wearing a dark suit and the kind of expression that made her heart stutter. They met in the center of the rooftop beneath a canopy of white blossoms. "This is insane," she whispered. He leaned close. "You're the one who said you didn't trust surprises." "I still don't." "Good," he said. "Then marry me." She froze. "What? Right here, right now? I already filed the license, and before you yell at me, your mom and brother are here, and yes, I flew them in. Your coworkers too. I even invited the kid from the hospital. He's walking again." She stared at him. "You're serious, completely?" "And if I say no, I'll wait," he said. "But I'm hoping you won't make me." She looked around. Everyone was watching, but it didn't matter. Because the only thing that mattered was the man in front of her. The man who'd broken down every wall she'd built and never once asked her to be anything but herself. She swallowed. "Okay," he blinked. "Okay," she nodded. "Let's do it." The crowd erupted. Miles stepped forward, officiant's book in hand, grinning like an idiot. Juliet laughed through tears as Tristan took her hand, and they stood there, surrounded by the people who mattered, under a sky that had finally cleared. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't planned, but it was theirs. And that was enough. Forever, the morning after their rooftop wedding, Juliet woke to the scent of fresh bread and the sound of low conversation drifting in from the kitchen. She stretched beneath the linen sheets, her body still buzzing with disbelief. She was married. To a man who had once seemed like a storm she couldn't outrun. Now he was the calm she returned to. She padded barefoot across the penthouse bedroom, sunlight gilding the hardwood floors. In the kitchen, Tristan stood at the stove, barefoot in sweats, flipping something in a skillet. "You're cooking?" she asked, stepping into the room. "I'm attempting," he corrected, "but I've already burned one batch. Don't get your hopes up." She slid her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "You married me." "I have no expectations left to lower," he laughed quietly, placing the spatula down before turning to face her. "You slept through half a dozen calls. Your brother tried to FaceTime you. I'll get back to him later," she murmured. "Right now, this feels more important." They sat at the marble island, eating lopsided omelets and still warm croissants he'd ordered from a nearby French bakery after abandoning his first attempt. The city moved beyond the glass walls, but neither of them cared. Later that day, they returned to her apartment to pick up the last of her things. The place felt smaller now, like a chapter she'd already finished reading. She stood in the doorway of her old bedroom, holding a box of worn paperbacks and framed photos, when Tristan came up behind her. "Anything you want to leave behind?" he asked. She glanced at the faded quilt on the bed, the chipped dresser she'd bought secondhand, the stack of therapy journals on the desk. "No, but I think it's time I stopped hiding in this version of myself," he nodded once. "Let's go home." Their new routine settled into something unexpected, easy. He worked from his home office most mornings while she transitioned her practice into a private pediatric clinic in Chelsea, something she'd dreamed about for years but never thought she'd have the backing to pursue. When she'd hesitantly mentioned it, Tristan hadn't offered to fund it. He'd asked her to build the proposal. She had. He'd invested not as a husband but as a partner. One evening, as they painted the walls of the soon-to-open clinic, she glanced at him over her shoulder. "Do you ever miss the version of your life when everything was under control?" "I thought control was safety," he said, dipping the roller into a tray of deep-sea green. "Then you walked in and taught me it was just another kind of fear." She turned back to the wall, her throat tight. At the clinic's opening weeks later, families filled the space. There were balloons, hand-painted signs, and a ribbon-cutting ceremony that Juliet tried to downplay until a city council member showed up with a plaque. She was mid-conversation with a donor when she felt a hand slide into hers. "You okay?" Tristan asked, his voice low, his presence grounding. "I'm terrified," she said, "and elated. Is that allowed?" "I think that's called living." That night, they returned to the lake house for the first time since the beginning. It was colder now, the trees bare and the air sharp with the promise of winter. Tristan lit the fireplace while Juliet unpacked a small bag, pulling out a worn photo album she hadn't shown him before. They sat on the couch, knees touching, flipping through images of her childhood mud-streaked jeans, scraped knees, a shy smile she'd grown out of. "Why haven't you shown me these before?" he asked, brushing his thumb over a picture of her holding a frog, grinning. "Because I didn't think you'd want to know the version of me that didn't have everything figured out." He turned a page, pausing on a photo of her with braces and a lopsided ponytail. "That's the version I wish I'd met first." She looked at him, startled. "I would have fallen in love with you then, too," he said. She shook her head, unable to speak, so she kissed him instead. Slow, fierce, certain when the snow came, it blanketed the world in silence. They spent weekends at the lake house, curled beneath thick quilts, reading by the fire. On weekdays, they returned to the city, him to his towers of glass and steel, her to her bright, bustling clinic filled with laughter and tiny footsteps. One afternoon, as she finished a session with a little girl recovering from a spinal injury, her assistant appeared in the doorway. "There's someone waiting for you in the lobby. He says it's urgent." Juliet stepped into the waiting area and found Tristan standing beside a man in a suit. The man handed her a thick folder. "What's this?" she asked. "Expansion plans," Tristan said. "2 more locations. You'll have full autonomy, but if you want it, you'll have the infrastructure to bring your work to more kids." She opened the folder, stunned. "You did this without asking?" "I didn't want to pressure you, but I believe in what you're building. And I want to be part of it." She looked at the plans, then back at him. "I can't believe I ever thought you were cold. You never saw the inside." "I see it now." They walked back to her office, shoulder to shoulder. She didn't say yes right away. She didn't need to. He knew she would. That night, she pulled him onto the clinic's therapy mat, laughing as they both collapsed onto the foam. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. Don't ever stop surprising me, but no more rooftop weddings." "I don't think I can top that." He leaned over her, brushing her hair from her cheek. "Deal, but I reserve the right to keep you on your toes. You already do." And as they lay there in the quiet of the clinic they'd built together, Juliet realized something she hadn't dared admit before. She wasn't afraid anymore, not of losing control, not of falling. Because she had already landed in the one place she never thought she'd find, home.